Good morning, everyone. It is an absolute pleasure to be here. As I'm sure is the case for so many of the educators in the room, we spend our whole careers hearing about the Finland education system. So to be here in the country that we've read about and heard so much about for decades really is just a huge privilege. And thank you for that extraordinary video. It's really the perfect introduction, and there's probably relatively little I can add to the images and the stories that you saw shared just now. This gathering is a wonderful reminder that education innovations come from anywhere in the world. And I think, judging by the conversations I heard on the bus on my way in this morning, everyone here knows that and embraces that ideology. I heard such a great exchange of questions and ideas among everyone on the bus. In fact, Sako, when you're planning for next year, you might think about putting the whole conference on a bus. That might be the best possible way to facilitate all of those one-on-one exchanges that really help each of us identify the best new ideas in the world and make sense of how they might work in the context that we operate in. So this idea that great innovations come from anywhere is old news to all of us in the room. But the reality is that our perspective is fairly unique on that. In fact, most of the education conversations in the world seem to be divided into two poles or two camps. On the one hand, we have the conversation about the school of the future, visionary education, adaptive learning, individualized instruction. This is the conversations we hear in the Silicon Valleys and the Silicon Wadis, the Silicon Alleys of the world. And it's a conversation fundamentally anchored in the world of technology. And at the other extreme, we have the conversation about education for the masses, about the imperative to find ways to reach the last 250 million children in the world who still fail to learn the basics, who fail to learn to read and write. And so often when we're having that conversation about education for the masses, our mind narrows, our imagination shrinks. And the only solution we can really imagine for reaching those most vulnerable children is a watered down, sterile, simplified form of education, scripted learning and instruction, narrow approaches, worksheets. The reality is that these two conversations need to become one. This breakthrough innovation found in the richest corners of the globe is not at odds with the challenge of bringing education to the last 250 million children in the world. In fact, quite the opposite. And the goal of bringing those two conversations together is why my organization, Luminos, exists. So a little bit about us. Luminos was created to advance education to unlock the light in every child, in particular the last 250 million children in the world who are as yet untouched by education. Our job is to find innovative, compelling new approaches across the developing world for reaching some of the children who are hardest to reach with education. We refine, test, and scale up those innovations and then help carry them across borders. Work of this kind is fundamentally based on partnerships, and so we couldn't do anything we do without partners. And one centrally important partner for our work is an organization called Geneva Global. Geneva Global is a philanthropic advisory firm. They incubate and create new and innovative models of serving the developing world and new philanthropic partnerships like my organization, Luminos. Geneva Global did the work to create, refine, and begin to scale this speed school model. And actually, one of my dear colleagues from Geneva Global is here in the room today, and just so you can all find him at the coffee break, Guy, can I ask you to stand up for a moment? Guy Cave and I have worked together with a large team of individuals in North America and, most importantly, across the different countries in which Speed School operates to grow and scale a uniquely different approach to teaching children in some of the toughest corners of the world. So this video was a great introduction. It gives you a very basic visual sense of what the Speed School classroom looks like. But let me take a step back and give you a bit of the context. Around the world, there are still 125 million children who don't get the chance to go to school. They're kept out of school because of poverty, because of conflict, or discrimination. Our program, Speed School, reaches those children who've been missed out and gives them a critical second chance at education. We teach the first 3 years of national curriculums in just 1 year and enable children to mainstream in their local village school with other children their own age. So the Speed School classroom, it's a little bit hard to imagine sitting here in this incredibly high-tech studio setting. So let's take a moment to sort of step into that. A Speed School classroom in most countries is really 4 simple mud walls. The only source of light is the window or door. There's typically no electricity. And the vast majority of Speed School classrooms are outside of the range of a cell signal. But what do they have? They have some pretty extraordinary young people who are incredibly dedicated teachers. Teachers come directly from the communities that we serve, and we train them in our unique approach to teaching and learning. Most of them have only a grade 10 qualification. They actually wouldn't meet the credentials to be formal teachers in the formal school system. But what they do have is a passion for reaching the neediest children in their communities and a commitment to learn a fundamentally different approach to teaching and learning. And the children themselves, how about that? So most children in the program are 10 or 11 years old, and generally speaking, when they join a Speed School class, it's the first time they've been learning in anything like a formal setting. So how do we make education work for that population? Well, first and foremost, it has to be fun. And so we take a very holistic approach to the pedagogy we've developed. Children learn at their desks with chalk and a board, one-on-one, in peers, in groups. They work with manipulatives, they work with song, they work with dance. They work with the resources of the community that they're based in, and a select number of outside resources in the forms of books and creative materials that we provide. It's a very simple setting, but the learning is incredibly rich. And by providing this intensive curriculum, we have about double the teach time of a typical African school. By providing a really personalized approach to learning, we cap our classroom size at just 25 students, which in the African context is about half the size of a typical classroom. And by taking that creative approach to teaching children not just a core curriculum, but teaching them how to learn going forward, we've been able to develop a model that's enabled over 100,000 children across Africa to get a second chance at education. So our job at Luminos, together with our partners Geneva Global, is to actually take this innovation across borders. And that's really the work that we've been doing over the last few years. This program was inspired by classrooms from all around the world, inspired by accelerated learning programs in Francophone West Africa, inspired by some of the child-centered pedagogies found in the most well-to-do classrooms in wealthier corners of the US. But the pedagogy itself was developed in context in Ethiopia, taking unique advantage of the assets and the challenges of that environment. As we've grown and scaled the program, it's certainly had to be modified over time. The core elements of the pedagogy are always the same: the focus on child learning, the extended day, intimate connection between teachers and children. But all myriad of ancillary aspects of the program have changed: how we engage parents, the setting in which it happens, the kind of school students transition into. And those customizations for context are as critical to the success of the program as the original core pedagogy is. Fundamentally, in our experience with Speed School and in all that we do, we don't believe that carbon copies work in education or in much of anything else. But we do believe there's a huge amount of opportunity for us to share innovation across borders. We don't believe in replication, but we do believe in inspiration. And at a gathering like this, I can't imagine a more fruitful opportunity for sharing just that kind of inspiration. Thank you all very much.